And okay, well, thank you guys for being patient with me. And as you look at your cameras, you can probably now see me talking on my phone, but that's okay. At least you guys can hear me. So welcome back to our Walking Wednesday. Today, we are going to dive into one of the most talked about topics and often most misunderstood in the wellness world, which is gut health. From juice cleanses and coffee enemas to apple cider vinegar, IBS, and the mysterious leaky gut, it can feel like our gut is always in the spotlight. But for all the hype, many people still feel confused about what actually helps or harms our digestive system. So, in this episode, I want to just walk you through the science of what the science really says about gut health and no fads, no fluff, just facts, some fun, and some practical steps that you can take to support your gut health starting today. So let's dig in. Your microbiome is where we're going to start. You've probably heard this before, but what exactly is your gut microbiome? Well, it is basically a little cesspool of microorganisms that live inside of your digestive tract. Most of these microorganisms are bacteria. However, there are some viruses that also live in there. And these microbes aren't just passive passengers. They actively help with digestion. They regulate your immune system. They support your metabolism. And they even communicate with your brain via something called the gut-brain axis. And this is not just fringe science. Studies published in the journals like Nature, Cell, and The Lancet have all confirmed that the gut microbiome influences everything from inflammation and mental health to obesity, autoimmune conditions, and even neurodegenerative diseases such as dementia and Alzheimer's. Our modern understanding of the microbiome really accelerated in 2007 when the Human Microbiome Project launched. This came after we were able to map our genome, and then we used that to map our gut. And this project really gave us our first real dive into what a healthy gut looks like and helped identify key bacterial strains. A lot of times if you're on that like wellness side of TikTok or even a lot of times in the news, they talk about certain bacteria strains that we want. One that's common is the bacteriorides, which once again, these are just now being studied for their roles in everything from glucose regulation to mood. So the science is really young, but it is real and it's evolving really fast. But because of its evolution, there's a lot of misunderstandings out there. So the first thing I want to tackle is cleanses. Gut cleanses can come in many forms, anywhere from juice fasts to herbal detoxes to colon cleanses, coffee enemas, but they all promise you the same thing. So the goal, right, is to reset your digestive system. And this idea can sound especially appealing if you've been feeling bloated or sluggish. But the evidence that most of these have is that there's just not a lot of evidence that they work. There's little to no scientific backing, and in some cases, they can actually harm your gut by disrupting your microbial balance or causing dehydration and electrolyte imbalances. So, for example, in two Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, so um, back to the evidence. So the evidence that these cleanses work is that there's just not any. There's no scientific backing, and in some cases, they can actually harm your gut by disrupting your microbial balance and causing dehydration or electrolyte imbalances. For example, in 2019, a review published in the Journal of Human Nutrition and Dietetics found that detox diets and colon cleanses showed no clinically proven benefits and actually may lead to increased bloating, cramping, diarrhea, and long-term microbiome disruption. So while the shortness So while the shortness light term, like the short term lightness that you feel coming from water loss or emptying your bowels, this isn't actually going to help increase um, your microbiome or flush anything out. And so the important thing is that now we know this, and there's other things that we can do to help reset our gut. And so the good news is that our gut is incredibly resilient and responsive. In fact, studies show that you can begin to shift your microbiome in as little as 24 hours by simply changing what you eat. A study published in Nature showed that just one day of switching from a plant-based diet to an animal-based diet or vice versa significantly altered the microbiome composition. This means that you don't need to spend hundreds of dollars or go to extremes. You can just feed your microbiome what it needs, which is fiber. So let's talk about what actually supports a healthy microbiome. The research is overwhelming on this point. Diets rich in plant-based, fiber-dense foods lead to more diverse and beneficial gut bacteria. One of the largest citizen science studies on the microbiome found that people who ate 30 or more different types of plants per week had a significantly more diverse gut bacteria than those who ate 10 or fewer. And it's that diversity that matters. Low microbial diversity has been linked to a range of chronic conditions, including type 2 diabetes, inflammatory bowel syndrome or disease, obesity, and even depression. So here's why fiber is so important. The microbes that live in your gut, the good ones that we want and that we like, they ferment dietary fiber into short chain fatty acids like butyrate. And butyrate is key when it comes to reducing inflammation, supporting your intestinal barrier, and even improving your brain health. And these microbes in our gut have a symbiotic relationship, meaning they work really well together when they're working, and when they don't work well together, um, they don't benefit each other. And so when we're not feeding our microbiome properly, it no longer functions in our favor. Specifically, when we don't feed them enough fiber, what they start to do is they start feeding on our gut's protective mucus layer. And this feast results in a cascade of issues by triggering our immune response. That mucus layer is super important. It'll actually come up a little bit later too. Because remember that these microbes, what they do is they usually help us maintain this thick layer. But when they start to feast on it, they're literally eroding our defenses and increasing our systemic inflammation and causing our body to have an immune response that's unnecessary. And this is not just a theory. In 2016, they found that a lack of dietary fiber caused gut bacteria to degrade the mucus layer, which increased susceptibility to infections and inflammatory responses. So what can we do about it? The good news is, like I said, our gut is very, very responsive. And so the U.S. Dietary Guideline recommends 22 to 34 grams of plant-based fiber per day. But emerging research suggests we may need even closer to 50 grams for optimal gut health. However, the bad news is that the average American gets 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day. So that's a very serious gap, even from what the U.S. dietary guidelines are to what research is showing us. So what can we do? How can we fix it? Well, I'll give you a couple of our best fiber-rich foods. The first one is legumes. So these are going to be your lentils, your beans, like black beans, and chickpeas. These in and of itself hold 12 to 19 grams of fiber per cup. Whole grains such as barley, oats, quinoa, and brown rice, those hold from 3 to 6 grams per serving. And then vegetables are also a really great source of fiber. Artichokes themselves hold 10 grams. Broccoli, carrots, Brussels sprouts, sweet potatoes with the skin on. Many of those hold anywhere from 5 to 8 grams of fiber per serving. Fruits can be a really good fiber option as well. Raspberries has 8 grams per cup. Pears and apples with the skin on. Figs and avocados. Avocados specifically have up to 10 grams per avocado. And then our nuts and seeds. Chia and flax seeds pack 7 to 10 grams of fiber in just 2 tablespoons. Almonds and pistachios offer around 3 grams per ounce. So, while it may sound like 50 grams may be really difficult to get, if we're eating enough fruits and vegetables and whole grains, it's actually quite easy for us to reach that 50 grams. And so when we're looking to build our meals, make sure there's a variety of color and plant foods. This way we can make sure that we're getting that recommended fiber. Okay, so let's pivot and talk about a couple more gut-related questions and topics we frequently get asked about. The first one I want to tackle is apple cider vinegar, because this one comes up a lot. Apple cider vinegar is everywhere. It's on TikTok. It's in wellness circles. You can even find apple cider vinegar in gummies. So it's claimed to do everything from burn fat to heal your gut to detox your liver. But what is the science behind it? Here's what we know. So we know that there have been some small studies done, specifically in diabetes care in 2004, which suggested that apple cider vinegar can modestly reduce post-meal blood sugar spikes and improve insulin sensitivity in people with insulin resistance. And that's promising, especially when paired with high-carb meals. But however, these are just small studies that have been done. They haven't been looking at a larger population or done over time. When it comes to gut health, the evidence around apple cider vinegar is very thin. Raw apple cider vinegar contains the mother, which is a mix of yeast and bacteria, but there's no evidence that these organisms colonize your gut or make lasting changes to your microbiome. And as for detoxing, that's purely marketing. Your liver and kidneys already detox your body, and apple cider vinegar does not flush out toxins. And apple cider vinegar is not risk-free. Undiluted vinegar can erode tooth enamel, irritate your esophagus, and even interact with medications like insulin or diuretics. So if you're going to use it, stick to small amounts, like a teaspoon diluted in water or mixed into a salad dressing. But the bottom line is that apple cider vinegar may have mild benefits for blood sugar control, but it's not a miracle, and it certainly is not going to heal your gut. So another question that we often get asked a lot about, and that we're asked in the survey a couple times, is this idea of leaky gut. What it is, what causes it, and how we can prevent it. So leaky gut is a term to describe increased intestinal permeability. This means the lining of your small intestines becomes more. Oh, we have someone who is unmuted.
468.
Okay, am I the only one you guys are hearing now?
Yes.
Yes, you're the only one. Except for now, we can't hear you at all.
Now can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, so leaky gut.
Nope, you're muted again.
Okay, sorry. The complicated technology problem. All right, so leaky gut. Leaky gut is a term used to describe increased intestinal permeability. So this means the lining of your small intestines become more porous than usual, allowing substances like toxins, undigested food particles, and bacteria to pass through the gut wall into your bloodstream. This can potentially trigger inflammation and immune response throughout the body. However, it's important to note that leaky gut is not an officially recognized medical diagnosis. So even though we've heard a lot about it on social media or even in the wellness spheres, it is not a recognized medical diagnosis, and the concept is based on the idea that a compromised gut barrier may contribute to various health issues, but there's a lot more research needed to fully understand its roles and its implications. So while leaky gut itself is not a formal diagnosis, going back to what we talked about the gut microbiome, increased intestinal permeability has definitely been observed in certain conditions, such as inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, type 1 diabetes, and others. In these cases, the compromised gut barrier may contribute to disease progression. But if we go back to what we talked about with our fiber, a lot of times what the science is finding is that it's because our diet is not helping our gut microbiome be able to keep a healthy GI tract. So when we talk about symptoms, a lot of times symptoms that are attributed to leaky gut can also simply be attributed to a poor diet. So things like bloating and gas, diarrhea or constipation, fatigue, joint pain, skin issues, and brain fog. All of these symptoms overlap with various other conditions, which can make it really difficult to pinpoint what the exact cause is. And that's where leaky gut tends to come up. And so I'm not dismissing the idea of leaky gut. I'm simply saying that it's often linked with a wide range of health issues, including autoimmune diseases and chronic fatigue. But the scientific evidence supporting these broad claims is extremely limited. Some researchers acknowledge that increased intestinal permeability can occur in certain diseases, but they caution against attributing it to the main cause without more conclusive evidence. But even if leaky gut isn't an official diagnosis, maintaining a healthy gut is crucial. So we talked about eating a high fiber diet. So we want to eat a balanced diet that includes a plant-forward, high fiber that focuses on fruit, vegetable, whole grains. That's kind of where we want to look at with our foods that we're eating, as well as including some lean proteins. Other things that we can do when it comes to feeling like if we have leaky gut or we feel like we're having some GI struggles is reducing our processed food intake. This is anything that has a lot of added sugars or refined carbs, and it can help us control the inflammation we commonly see when looking at our gut and other chronic conditions. However, that can be very can promote a way of thinking that can be really hard for us to maintain when we say, oh, just limit processed foods, which is why at Employee Wellness, we often talk about simply adding. If we're looking at adding more plants into our diet and eating more fruits and vegetables and whole grains, you're not going to have to limit your processed foods because you're going to start filling up on other things. So that's one way that we can help our diet without having to go on a quote-unquote diet. The other thing is including fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, and kimchi. This is because it can introduce beneficial bacteria to your gut. And I want to just dive into fermented food for just 2 seconds. You've probably heard that they're good for your gut, but what does that even mean? So fermentation is basically when microorganisms like bacteria or yeast break down carbs, specifically sugars and starches, in foods. This process creates things like lactic acid or alcohol, depending on the microbe in the food. Think of it as a controlled microbial magic. The kicker is that when you eat these foods, you're not just getting the flavor, you're getting live beneficial bacteria. aka probiotics, which can help support your gut microbiome. And yes, this one is fully backed by science. A study published actually this year in Frontiers in Microbiology showed that people who regularly eat fermented foods had greater microbial diversity in their gut, which is just, once again, a fancy way of saying more good bugs, which means more balance. So how do fermented foods help? Well, they boost your gut microbiome because they're full of live microbes like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, which is the good guys that help with digestion and keep the bad bacteria in check. They also produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. Remember, I talked about that one a little bit earlier. These are the power snacks for your gut lining, and they help reduce inflammation and strengthen our gut barrier. They may even help prevent what we just talked about with leaky gut. And then they also help support our immune system. 70% of our immune system lives in our gut. So once again, I'm going to repeat that. 70% of our immune system lives in our gut. So feeding it good bacteria from fermented foods can help fine-tune our immune system. So what are the best fermented foods to eat? Well, there's a few options. We can have yogurt. We just want to make sure that the packaging says live and active cultures. Kefir is also an option. That's a drinkable yogurt, but more probiotic rich. Kimchi, which is a spicy fermented cabbage from Korea. Sauerkraut, which is a tangy cabbage. Now, word of caution about sauerkraut. We want to make sure that it's actually fermented. A lot of times canned sauerkraut, or the ones you'll see in the stores, will be pickled and not fermented. They have very similar tastes, but the way that they're made is different, and pickling does not have the same benefits as fermentation. Tempeh is also an option, which is fermented soybeans, and then kombucha, which is a fizzy fermented tea. And so we want to make sure that when we're adding in these new foods into our diet, whether it be fermented foods or more vegetables and fruit and whole grains, we want to start small. Especially with fermented foods, think like just a couple spoonfuls a day. And we want to mix them into meals that we're used to eating. So things like kimchi with rice bowls, yogurt and smoothies, tempeh and stir fries. If you go all in and start eating way too much, the result can be stomach pain, bloating, and it will make you quit before you even get started. And this is true for most dietary advice, especially when we're adding to our diet. We want to make sure we aren't going from eating 3 plants a day to 10 plants a day overnight. This can result in disaster and giving up. So try just adding in 1 extra plant a day and a couple spoonfuls of fermented food. The next week, increase it to 2 plants a day and a few more spoonfuls. Continue this until you reach your specific goals, which will help change your gut and adjust that microbiome. And while all these steps can promote a healthy gut, it's important to consult with a healthcare professional, especially if you're experiencing persistent symptoms. I'm not a doctor. I've just been someone who has researched this a lot. So that's all I have for today's episode. Once again, our key takeaways here is that gut health isn't about the gimmicks. It's about consistency. So feeding your gut with a variety of fiber-rich plants will be the best way to help combat any symptoms that you're having. Stay curious about the science and don't fall for the shortcuts that sound too good to be true. If you enjoyed today's workshop, share it with a friend, as well as drop me a message about any other wellness-related questions you may have. I'd love to cover more about what you're curious with. On your screen is our QR code. Go ahead and scan it for more questions. And until next time, eat well, be kind to your gut, and stay happy. Let's see if I have anything in the chat. Laura, we talked briefly about IBS. I can send you a follow-up email about some of the suggestions that they found, but Mostly with IBS, it's all about increasing our plant fiber and making sure that we're doing it slowly.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question? I was a little late
Of
to the
course.
meeting and I'm not sure if you covered this, but what are some of the recommended high fiber foods, if you don't mind just listing a dozen or less?
Yeah. Yep. So a lot of the high fiber foods are going to be your legumes. So specifically your lentils, black beans, chickpeas. Those pack 12 to 19 grams of fiber per 1 cup. And then whole grains, specifically when we're looking at whole grains, we're going to be looking at barley, oats, quinoa, and brown rice. Those are going to be your best bets for fiber. With vegetables, we're looking for things with the skin on. So sweet potatoes with the skin on. Artichokes are also another really good one. And then your dark leafy greens, so kale, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, carrots as well have a lot of fiber in them.
Awesome.
For your fruits, those are going to be your raspberries have a lot of fiber, 8 grams per cup. Pears, apples, once again, we want to keep the skin on for those. Figs, and then avocados themselves have up to 10 grams of dietary fiber. So that's a great one as well. And then for nuts and seeds, your chia and flax seeds, those have 7 to 10 grams in just 2 tablespoons. So you can even just add those in throughout your day and know that you're getting, those 10 grams in. And then almonds and pistachios also offer about 3 grams per ounce. And that's true of most seeds. So that goes for walnuts and hazelnuts and all of that. So yeah, does that
Thanks
help a
for
little
going
bit?
through that list again. Yes. I'm sure
Of
I figured
course.
you'd went through that, but thank you.
Yes, anytime. Anyone else have any other questions? Okay, and yes, Emmy, I can send you that information as well for plant fiber. And Laura, I'll send you an email about some IBS. Okay, well, thank you guys for joining and thanks for bearing with me with all that technical difficulties. I appreciate it. We will see you next month.
Thank you.